My name is Hazel. I'm 29, and I used to think that becoming a millionaire from buying a lottery ticket for the first time was something that could never happen. And yet, that's exactly how I won the lottery. But the joy didn't stay with me for long. The trouble that came my way wasn't from thieves or taxes, it came from my own family. When I refused to split half of the money with my parents and give a share to my sister Tiffany, their beloved golden child, my family nearly went up in flames. I will never forget the moment my father threw the $1 million ticket into the fire, saying, "If you won't share, then no one gets anything." But their smug, satisfied faces quickly turned to shock when I suddenly laughed out loud. Before I tell you why, let me know what city you're watching from. Grab yourself a cup of coffee and settle in, because you're about to witness the twisted schemes my family wove against me, and how I turned the power dynamics in my family upside down. I was born into a middle-class family in the suburbs of Chicago, a place where snow falls early, the neighbors all know each other's business, and dinner at 6 p.m. was a sacred ritual. My father, Albert Williams, was a civil engineer. My mother, Diana, stayed at home crafting handmade items to sell online. We weren't rich, but we never went hungry. Everything in the house, however, was always arranged around what was considered reasonable. I was the firstborn, the planned child, the one of expectations. My parents wanted me to set an example, to behave properly, to get high grades. I learned to fold clothes neatly, wash dishes without being told, and to never disturb anyone when the adults were in a bad mood. Tiffany was born when I was 3, and from the very moment she arrived, I saw it clearly. The favorite child just showed up. While most parents try to love their children equally, in our house, affection leaned heavily to one side, like a glass that only fills when it's placed near a certain person. Tiffany was the kind of daughter my parents adored without needing a reason. At age 5, she was picked to sing a solo in her preschool performance, even though she often forgot the lyrics and sang off-key. Mom said, "She has eyes that speak." At that time I was 8. I had already learned to help Mom cook, wipe the table, fold laundry. I wasn't allowed to forget to clear the dishes, even if I had a final exam that day. When Tiffany was 10, Mom let her skip school midweek to attend an art exhibit, just because her best friend was featured in a photo. I was 13, juggling a part-time job at the local supermarket while studying for college entrance exams, and still had to babysit every weekend. No one asked if I was tired. At 16, Tiffany was gifted a brand new MacBook just 3 days after it launched by our parents, so she could collaborate on group assignments online. At 19, I was working 3 jobs to maintain my scholarship, struggling to cover rent and textbooks. Every time I called home, Mom only asked, "Your sister just made the dance team. Did you see her photos on Facebook?" Each passing year felt like an unspoken comparison I could clearly feel. What Tiffany had was a given. What I earned came at the cost of silence, endurance, and growing up too soon. And the hardest part to admit, no one in the family thought anything was wrong. They thought I was strong. They believed I could handle things on my own. They placed their trust in me, but not their care. Don't get me wrong, my parents weren't monsters. They gave me a proper education. They never hit me, rarely raised their voices. Sometimes Mom would still send me a box of cookies in the winter, with a small card that read, "Don't forget to dress warm." But the imbalance, though subtle, day by day, was constant, year after year. As we grew older, that pattern didn't change. Tiffany went to art school, changed her major 3 times, and still had her tuition, rent, and a creative needs credit card covered by our parents. And me? I studied while working, clung to my scholarship, and graduated with a student loan larger than the car I used to dream of. By the time I turned 29, my life was stable, if not truly mine. I worked as an HR specialist at a mid-sized company, decent pay, enough for fresh flowers on the kitchen table on weekends. I rented a small apartment on the edge of the city, lined with maple trees that shed their leaves each fall, and golden light that spilled through the windows late at night. No house, no new car, still paying off college debt every month. But I had a little corner that was mine. I had Poppy, my gentle gray cat who curled up in my lap each night. And most of all, I had peace. Peace from the unfairness I no longer had to witness in my parents' home. It was a Saturday, and I woke up later than usual. Reaching for Poppy's food container like I did every morning, I realized it was empty. She looked up at me with eyes both patient and reproachful, as if she knew she was the only priority in my life right now. So I got dressed, tied up my hair, and headed to the supermarket. I was standing in line at Walmart, behind a couple arguing over which dish soap was the most cost-effective. In my cart, a few cans of soup, a carton of almond milk, and a bag of food for Poppy. Right next to the register was a small plastic stand filled with lottery tickets, loud colors, glittering boxes. I had never played before, but for some reason that day, I paused longer than usual. "1 Mega Millions, please," I said. My voice sounded like it came from someone else. The cashier raised an eyebrow, smiled faintly, tore the ticket, and handed it to me. I slipped it into my wallet, tucked between last month's gas receipt and an expired pizza coupon. Thought nothing of it, just a ticket. A moment of weekend impulse. But maybe, just maybe, it's those impulsive moments that end up changing your life the most. I forgot about that ticket in my wallet for 3 whole days. Tuesday, I was working from home. In the middle of sorting through job applicants, a notification flashed across the screen. The Mega Millions results had been announced the night before. It reminded me that I had bought a ticket. I reached over to scratch Poppy's head and joked that maybe I'd won. Really, I was just entertaining myself, trying to shake off the dullness of another round of interviews. I pulled out my wallet, unfolded the slightly crumpled ticket, and placed it beside the winning numbers on my screen. 18-32, 44, 56, 61, 20, Moondravde. First read, no match, then a second, then a third. My hands began to tremble. My eyes blurred. I had to blink rapidly. I wasn't sure I was seeing correctly. I opened my phone, checked 3 different websites to confirm, and the numbers were all the same. No mistake. I didn't scream. I didn't jump. My heart just pounded so violently I had to sit down on the cold kitchen floor. I felt the tiles beneath me. My back was damp with sweat. I looked at Poppy, still nibbling at her newly bought food, utterly unaware that my world had just shattered and reformed in an instant. I whispered, "No way. No way." But it was real. "Poppy, I just won the lottery." I leapt up, ran to the bathroom, splashed water on my face, just to confirm I wasn't dreaming. Then I held the ticket under my desk lamp, tilting it from every angle to examine the ink, like if it were too real. Surely, it couldn't belong to me. That night I was so overwhelmed with joy I couldn't sleep until 2 a.m. I Googled how to claim the prize, read about what past winners did with their money. I asked if I should tell anyone. Every website said the same, don't. Even Shannon, my best friend since high school, warned, don't tell a soul until the money's in your account. Don't go public without legal protection. Keep it secret until you've got a lawyer. But the next morning, I picked up the phone anyway. I wanted to tell my family. "Mom, can I come over for dinner tonight?" My voice still carried the tremor of what had happened the day before, a mix of nervousness, gratitude, worry, and exhilaration. Like the world was melting into something liquid, spilling open into something entirely new. My mother didn't notice. Or if she did, she didn't ask. She replied in that same familiar, even tone, like I had just offered to bring over a bag of groceries. "Sure, come early to help prep. Tiffany's a bit busy. She might be late." That was it. No. "How are you?" No. "Is something going on?" Just an instruction. And another name dropped into what I thought was supposed to be my moment. But I'd grown used to that from her. I didn't let it bother me. That evening, I returned to the gray two-story house where I'd spent my childhood. Among the scent of pressed wood, the faded floral wallpaper, and the creaking floorboards worn by time, I brought with me a loaf of garlic bread I'd just baked, still warm. Tiffany was in the kitchen, snapping photos of the salad with her phone. Dad was adjusting the speakers, playing one of those old jazz records he always said made people sit with themselves. Everything felt so normal. No one looked long enough to see that something in me had shifted, that my body was carrying a different kind of weight. But when the main dish was served, when the four of us sat around the table as we always had, when the conversation drifted from weather to rising gas prices, to Tiffany's upcoming mini-gallery opening downtown, I knew if I didn't speak now, I never would. I took a sip of wine, set the glass down, and drew a deep breath. "The lottery ticket I bought last Saturday," I said, each word carefully weighed, "won $2.5 million. I expected my parents and Tiffany to raise their glasses in celebration, but they didn't. For the first few seconds, everything froze, as if the whole house turned to ice. Then my mother stood up. "Oh my God, Hazel, are you sure? Did you sign it yet? Where's the ticket? Did you keep it safe?" My father said nothing. He set his wine glass down with slow, deliberate precision, the way he always did when he was signaling the end of a conversation. Tiffany leaned in, her gaze suddenly sharp. "Are you planning to keep it all?" That question hit the table like a blade. Not curiosity, not a joke, just a direct claim, and it left me struggling to answer. My mother didn't wait. She was already typing into her phone's notes app. 50% for us," she said, like she was splitting the tip after a restaurant meal. 10% for your sister. She's been dreaming of a Volvo XC60. The rest, do whatever you like. Shopping, travel, whatever." No one asked how I felt. No one asked if I was happy. No one looked me in the eyes long enough to see that I was terrified. For the first time, I set down my fork and spoke, not loudly, but clearly, enough to silence the entire table. "I'm going to use that money to pay off my student loans," I said, each word slipping from somewhere deep in my throat. "Tiffany doesn't even know what student debt feels like, just like how neither of you ever asked what college life was like for me." They said nothing. Tiffany frowned. Mom pursed her lips. Dad looked away. "I'll use part of it to buy a small home, a place where I can keep a cat, water my plants, and not worry if rent goes up tomorrow, because even now I'm still renting." I took a breath, light, but enough to keep my chest from bursting. "And the rest. I'm saving for my future. Not because I'm selfish, but because this is the first time I've had the freedom to choose without needing permission." I stood up. My voice didn't shake. My hands weren't cold. The only thing I felt was the hollow space opening between me and the three people I used to call home. "You've always only seen Tiffany. You've never truly seen me. And I'm not sharing this money with anyone." I grabbed my bag, said, "Enjoy dinner," and walked out the door without looking back. My car was parked by the curb. I climbed into the driver's seat, rested my hands on the wheel, but didn't start the engine. A breeze slipped in through the window I hadn't fully closed, and my eyes stung, not from tears, but from a quiet unease. I pressed the gas. The car rolled forward, through a silence I couldn't name, as I tried to remember the last time I felt free without guilt. I began to think about my childhood, about birthday cakes without candles, about grades no one asked about the small suitcase I carried off to college. No one waved goodbye. Because sometimes, the past doesn't come back to hurt you. It comes back to remind you how far you had to live just to arrive here. After returning home, I wasn't surprised when my phone began to ring that very night. First, it was my mother's name on the screen, then my father's. Finally, Tiffany's. I didn't answer. I needed one night just one, where I could breathe in peace, absorb what had just happened, and not brace myself for retaliation. But they didn't let me be for long. The next morning, my mother left a voice message, her tone no longer soft. It was sharp, clipped, like the cold clang of a metal knife hitting a cutting board. That was completely out of line, Hazel. The whole family was there. Everyone was happy for you. And then you went and insulted your parents and stormed out while we were still eating. You made everyone feel embarrassed. What, you think you're better than us, now that you've got money? I deleted the message after the third listen. That afternoon, I received an email from my father. No subject line. Just a short paragraph, nearly like a workplace memo. Your mother is very upset. You've hurt this family. No one is forcing you to share the money. But the way you said things wasn't right. As a person, you must have compassion. Don't forget who raised you. I thought I'd feel angry, but strangely, I just felt hollow. A strange kind of emptiness. Not because I no longer loved them, but because I finally realized that love had never been placed where it belonged. That evening, Tiffany's text cut through the softest part of me like a blade. You were really cruel. Mom and Dad sacrificed so much for you. No one's asking you to repay them. But the way you acted, you're cutting yourself off from this family. I sat still for a long while, eyes unblinking, fingers hovering over the phone, not typing a reply. I knew that if I wrote back, I'd have to explain a lifetime of being misunderstood, and no message could ever carry that weight. I used to believe that if I were kind enough, quiet enough, hardworking enough, they would understand. But now I see, with them, I was never a whole person, with emotions, needs, limits, and dreams of my own. I was a role, a name on the family duty roster, the eldest daughter, a supporting act, for someone else's spotlight. And the moment I dared step out of that script, I became ungrateful, a traitor, the one who forgot her parents' sacrifice. I waited a long time to be heard, but now, the only thing that echoed back after I spoke was pushback. So I stepped into a new silence, not one of endurance, but one of no longer needing to justify myself. I thought of Grandma Helen, my mother's mother, the one I confided in as a child every time I noticed the disparity between Tiffany and me. But today, I couldn't tell her this story. I knew it would break her heart. Instead, I thought of Shannon, the person I turned to when even Grandma felt too close. After a moment's hesitation, I called, not to vent details, not to complain, just because I needed someone who shared no blood with me, who wasn't tied to any version of myself I'd spent 2 decades trying to maintain. Shannon picked up on the second ring. Her voice was as always, steady, clear, not fragile in its gentleness, nor hard enough to make others shrink. It was the voice of someone who had been hurt enough to stop asking, why? And instead ask, where are you right now? I told her briefly. No need to explain, no scene setting. She stayed silent for a few seconds, then said the one sentence that, until that moment, no one had ever said to me. You don't owe them anything. I froze, not because the words were surprising, but because it was the first time I heard them spoken out loud, without accusation, without scrutiny, not wrapped in layers of advice laced with guilt. Just a simple truth. Light enough to dissolve into the air, but heavy enough to tip over an entire world I'd been walking through like a tightrope dancer. I know, I said, but knowing and believing are different. Then start with action, Shannon replied. Belief can follow. She paused, then continued, her voice still calm, but tinged with careful deliberation, as if she were carrying a thought I hadn't dared to name yet. I have a friend. She's a lawyer who specializes in finance and inheritance. If you're open to it, I can arrange a meeting for tomorrow morning. I didn't respond right away. I set the phone down, poured myself some water, opened the window to let the breeze in, then picked it back up. Okay, please set it up. After the call, I sat in silence for a long time. No music, no social media, just the sound of the clock ticking and a cup of tea cooling in my hand. I thought of all the times I had said yes out of fear of reproach, of the times I stepped back, not because I lacked reason, but because I knew in my family reason wasn't measured in logic. It was measured in hierarchy. That night, I left the family group chat, muted my mother's number, and for the first time in years, I slept without the sense that I was disappointing someone. A deep sleep, dreamless, undisturbed. At 9:05 the next morning, Shannon took me to a small cafe nestled behind a block of old red brick buildings, about 15 minutes from downtown. We sat at a window table, where the late autumn sunlight filtered through dusty glass, casting honey-colored streaks across a scarred wooden tabletop. The woman who joined us was Shannon's friend, a financial and inheritance lawyer, neatly dressed in a white blouse, eyes direct, neither sharp nor soft. I felt slightly embarrassed placing the lottery ticket on the table in front of people who knew the law better than I ever knew myself. But I did it, because this time, I wanted to believe that no one else would make this decision for me. She read through the numbers, confirmed the value, and began speaking in a calm, measured tone, explaining each payout option, the tax implications, and the potential risks if I made my win public too soon. We spent 2 hours and 3 cups of coffee, long enough for me to learn that sometimes silence isn't just defense, it's strategy. She recommended I take the lump sum, an after-tax total of about $1.38 million. Not a perfect figure, but the best option if I wanted full control from the start. I nodded. Not because I understood everything, but because I knew it was time to stop asking for permission and start allowing myself to live by my own choices. She handed me a list of next steps: open an independent bank account, secure my identity, avoid using the words lottery win unless absolutely necessary. When I signed those first documents, not to receive the money yet, but to affirm that I was the recipient, my hand trembled. Because I had never held anything this big in my life, not even myself. And I began to understand, money wouldn't fix my broken relationships, but it could be the key to never having to stay in them another day longer. I didn't tell anyone, not even my family, that I'd met with a lawyer and begun the process to secure my legal rights. I thought staying silent might make them back off. But just 3 days later, I received the first message from my mother. The first message came on Monday morning, a single line from my mother, no punctuation, no greeting. Wednesday afternoon, the family is having a financial meeting at our house, make time. I read it over and over. No, can you make it? No, if you'd like to join. Just a command disguised as familial concern. 2 hours later, another message, this time from Tiffany. I've prepared a few preliminary spreadsheets. Mom and Dad also have some solid proposals for long-term investment. Let me know if you want the PDF. PDF. Long-term investment proposals. Preliminary spreadsheets. No one asked how I was feeling. No one asked if I wanted to share the money. No one asked if I was still a person in this story, or just a number on a balance sheet. I sat in my rented apartment, still carrying the damp scent of pressed wood whenever it rained, and pictured the meeting I'd never been consulted on. I saw my mother at the head of the table, notebook open, speaking in that flat tone I'd heard for 2 decades, about what we should do and how we need to think ahead. I saw Tiffany clicking through a PowerPoint, using the jargon of someone who'd flunked 3 art majors but spoke fluently of high-yielding funds. I saw my father nodding, sipping tea, offering calm analysis like he did with contractors over foundation blueprints. I didn't laugh. I didn't cry. I just felt like I had died. And this was the division of a dead woman's assets. I replied with a single line, "I won't be attending." Not because I was afraid, but because I knew that if I stepped into that room, I'd become that little girl again, hunched at the edge of the table, nodding when spoken to, staying silent when I had something to say. And I'd lived that life long enough. What I didn't know was that walking away from that meeting would ignite the most dangerous night of my life. I thought that by refusing the financial meeting, they'd understand, or at the very least, they'd back off for a while. But the silence I hoped for was something they had never learned to live with. 4 days later, on a dull gray Saturday afternoon, I was folding laundry, listening to an old Norah Jones recording, when I heard a knock. 3 quick, sharp raps. Not the kind you'd expect from someone asking politely to come in. I opened the door, and there they were, all 3 of them, Dad, Mom, and Tiffany. Their eyes carried no trace of a social visit. They didn't wait to be invited in. They walked straight into my home, sat down like they still owned the power that once bound me for a third of my life. Mom spoke first, as always. "We don't have to make this tense. I know you understand where I'm coming from," she said, voice low but edged like a razor skating across calm water. My father didn't sit. He paced around my apartment, his gaze unhidden, scanning like he was inspecting a construction site, not visiting his daughter's home. I thought he was just doing what he always did when he visited, checking outlets, commenting on floorboards, criticizing my old curtains. But this time, he stopped when his eyes landed on something I had forgotten, a small glass container on top of the fridge, where I had carefully placed a laminated copy of the winning lottery ticket, a souvenir both proud and cautious. His eyes lit up, not with emotion, but with something cold, sharp, and terribly familiar. He reached up, took the glass box down, opened the lid, and held the ticket like a piece of evidence in a courtroom. He raised it in front of me. His voice wasn't asking. It was commanding, short and solid, like a gavel hitting hardwood. "If you don't share with us, I'll burn this. No one gets anything." He thought I'd panic. He thought I'd apologize, promise, compromise, like all the other times I cut pieces of myself just to patch over the gaps left by others. But this time, I didn't tremble. I stepped closer, looked him straight in the eye. Not with anger, not with contempt, just a kind of emptiness so deep there was no space left for hurt. "Go ahead," I said. "The real one isn't here, and it never belonged to any of you." Tiffany stood up, slipped her phone into her bag, and headed for the door. Mom folded the envelope in her hands silently, turned away, as if for once she had no words left to threaten with. They left without another word. I didn't lock the door right away. I stood there, watching the empty hallway, listening to their footsteps fade. I thought after that threat, they'd be too angry to ever set foot in my apartment again. But to them, a refusal wasn't a stop sign. It was just an invitation in another form. 2 nights later, I woke to a message from my mother, sent at 4 a.m. "After leaving your place, your dad and I talked. We think we were wrong. Dad suggested we do a little BBQ at your place. He's ordering meat from that restaurant you loved as a kid." I believed them. I thought maybe, just maybe, they'd changed. So I replied, "Okay, I'll make a salad." That evening, they brought a bottle of white wine, a box of grilled meat from my favorite Chicago restaurant, and smiles nearly too perfect. "Let's celebrate," my mom said, opening the wine, handing me a glass. "Family always matters more than money, right?" she added, toasting me. I let them in, still unsure. Dad spoke first. Slow, quieter than usual, with an unfamiliar sincerity. "I'm really sorry for how I acted. Your mother and I won't ask for a share, if that's what you truly want." Then he raised his glass, locked eyes with me, and said, "Let's drink this and move past it." For the first time in my life, I heard a direct apology from my father. I drank the whole glass. Not a drop left. Mom smiled, began telling an old story about me and Tiffany as kids, her tone softer than usual, her glass clinking mine with a curious precision. I don't know how it happened, but I had finished a second glass. Then Tiffany chimed in. You really are strong, you know? Getting a scholarship without help? Impressive. I smiled weakly, drank another, and then another, and another, until the room started to tilt, like a tiny boat drifting on a calm lake, the world slowly spinning. I woke up on the sofa. The room was silent. No parents, no Tiffany. The wine was still there, the scent of grilled meat now stale. I thought they'd simply gone home, like I did, quietly tipsy. I began cleaning the leftovers, still a little dizzy. And then I remembered something Shannon once said. Prepare a fake ticket. Maybe not for thieves, but for your own family. She had said it during a walk around the lake the previous Sunday. Suddenly, a chill ran down my spine, despite it being summer. I ran to the cabinet where I kept my bags, opened mine. Frozen. The fake ticket was gone. Not a trace. I didn't panic. I sat down, sipped some water, and texted Shannon. The replica ticket was taken. Thank you for warning me. I used to think betrayal would feel like knives in my chest, but when you've prepared for it, you don't fear it anymore. Even when it comes from those who once called themselves your family. I didn't say anything more after texting Shannon. I simply locked the door, drew the curtains tight, and sat quietly in the soft yellow glow of my desk lamp, as if, by staying still long enough, I could unmake the truth of what had just happened. I didn't know if they'd gone home angry or triumphant. I didn't know what they felt, holding that fake lottery ticket in their hands, naively believing it was all they needed to walk away with millions. All I knew was, maybe it was time the truth exploded, the way they had always done with my life. The next morning, a call from Shannon woke me up. She had just read internal lottery system news. A middle-aged man, accompanied by his wife and daughter, tried to redeem an invalid lottery ticket. They're now under investigation for possible document forgery. I smiled. Not a happy smile. Not a smug one either. Just a quiet smile. The kind you give when someone trips over a trap they set themselves. 3 hours later, just as I expected, they came back. Mom knocked first. This time, 5 quick, impatient bangs. Urgent. Furious. I didn't open the door. I just stood behind it, listening to every sound like I was staring into a mirror of old memories. Open the door. Hand over the ticket. I know you still have the real one. You don't want parents anymore, is that it? And then the final blow, sharp as a knife slicing through time and memory. If you don't, then from now on, we're done. I didn't reply right away. I let the silence stretch, not as punishment, but to test whether that sentence carried even a shred of regret. It didn't. So I opened my mouth, slowly, but clearly. No problem. No rage, no accusations. Just 2 words, soft as a door clicking shut, from the inside. I heard their footsteps retreat, fast, heavy, weighed down by the truth now laid bare. And in that moment, I understood something I had always suspected. They had never truly seen me as family. I had always been a tool, a symbol, a filler, a bandage for the failures they refused to own. And now, the tool was gone. I went to my desk, picked up my phone, and started drafting a short list of actions. Change the locks, move out, hire temporary security. I wasn't afraid, just resolved to protect myself the way I should have long ago. I decided I would move. And as I packed old belongings, I stumbled upon an old photo frame, the only family picture I still had. I didn't throw it out. I wrapped it carefully, placed it in a locked drawer. Because sometimes, the only things worth keeping are the ones that remind you what never to forget. I knew, after that night, nothing could go back to how it was. No more waiting. No more reasons to give them another chance. I had spent my whole life waiting, for them to see me, to acknowledge me, to say a genuine, sorry. And I did receive it, only to trade it for a betrayal colder, sharper, more deliberate than ever before. When someone is hurt to the bone, they don't scream, they don't cry, they just go silent and vanish. The next morning, I didn't go to work. I called my landlord to say I'd be breaking my lease. I booked a moving service, picked a smaller apartment across town, where no one knew me, where no old friends lived, where no familiar neighbors would ask questions. I changed my number, updated every banking detail, email, address. Each step felt like shedding old skin, not to run away, but to finally survive. That afternoon, after the last technician left, installing security cameras in my new place, I closed the door, and for the first time, I didn't feel afraid. No one knew where I was. No one had the right to cross the boundary I had finally drawn. I watched the new white curtains sway gently in the breeze, and that night, for the first time in my life, I slept long, without dreaming of tense family dinners, cold sighs, or words swallowed in my chest. Only the sound of my own steady breath, safe, whole. But I knew the storm wasn't over. Because deep down, those who fail to win your trust will always try to claim your presence by wounding you anew. The call came Monday morning, after my first weekend alone in my new apartment. I picked up instantly when I saw the name Grandma Helen, the only person who had ever truly seen how my parents treated Tiffany and me differently. Her voice was gentle, tinged with worry, as if afraid I'd been hurt too deeply. "Are you okay, sweetheart?" she asked. "I know what's going on. They're saying things that aren't true." I stayed quiet. She continued. "They're telling people you're mentally unstable, that you imagined winning the lottery, that you lost the ticket because of paranoia. But me, I believe your silence more than I believe their noise." I broke down in tears, because only she truly cared. "You don't have to say anything," she added. "Just live in peace. I've always seen your strength, since you were a little girl. Sometimes, just one person's belief is enough to mend the torn parts of your heart." I didn't say a word. But from that moment, I knew. I had stepped into a new chapter of my life, one no longer built on anyone else's approval. And in the days that followed, when I officially received the transferred lottery winnings, I began to write down my story in a way that no one could ever deny again. A few days later, I received an email with a simple subject line: "Transfer complete." The $1.38 million flowed quietly into my account like a gentle river, silent, undramatic. But I knew. It had permanently changed the course of my life. I didn't call anyone, didn't post on social media, didn't take a screenshot of the transaction. I just smiled, a faint smile, almost invisible to the world but unmistakably real to me. It was the clearest sign yet that I had survived. And for the first time, being alone didn't feel like loneliness. I played an old Norah Jones jazz record, tidied up a little, then opened my laptop. I created a new folder titled Freedom Plan and began writing down the simplest, most rooted desires. A small house in a quiet place, a personal fund for children overlooked like I once was, and a few gifts to thank the only people who ever believed in me when I had nothing to prove. I used to think loneliness was punishment, but now I understand. It was the beginning of freedom, and I had never felt more present in my own life. A week after seeing that 7-digit number in my bank account, I returned to the one place that had always felt truly safe: Grandma Helen's small home, where dry leaves blanketed the low steps and the roof had begun to rot at the edges from neglected spring rains. I didn't call ahead. I brought 2 bags, one with small gifts and the other with a printed renovation plan I had drawn myself. "I want to fix your roof," I said. "And the kitchen too. You've been using that same stove since the 90s. She looked at me, narrowed her eyes, then smiled. As if she knew I wasn't just talking about broken shingles, but gently stitching up old memories I'd once patched with tears. Together, we picked kitchen tiles, chose paint colors, and ate noodles on the porch at noon. She told me about her days as a secretary at a small law firm, about women who once leaned on her shoulder to cry. Then she said softly, "You know, sometimes it only takes one person putting their faith in the right place to change someone's whole path." I didn't reply, but her words planted a seed. 3 weeks later, I filed paperwork to establish a small foundation, named simply The Silent Daughters. No flashy ads, no media coverage, just a modest co-working office, a separate bank account, and 3 initial programs: scholarships for girls escaping toxic homes, free legal consultation, and a short-term shelter for those pressured into peace in controlling relationships. I wrote the site's first motto: "You don't have to shout to be believed. Your silence is already a story." And when I saw that sentence glowing against a white screen, I knew. Some pain doesn't come to crush us. It comes to redirect us toward the light. There would be more trials ahead. But at least now, I knew I was walking in the right direction. Then, just when I thought I'd never hear from anyone in my old family again, a message lit up from a familiar number. Tiffany. The message arrived on a Thursday afternoon. Sunlight still stretched across the kitchen counter as I folded new bed sheets for the guest room I planned to turn into a reading nook. "Hey, I'm sorry." Just 4 words. Brief, but they stopped my heart for a beat. I opened the phone and kept reading. "I'm sorry for believing Mom and Dad without question, for thinking you were just overly sensitive, for not seeing what you had to endure all these years." I sat down, letting the light pour in through the window, reading each line again, not to verify, but to truly hear the tone. For the first time, my little sister was actually talking to me, not to the image of that strange older sister others had painted. Shannon had once told me, her voice clear as a truth buried deep, "It's not about forgiving them, it's about freeing yourself." I didn't reply right away. I gave myself space. I made a cup of tea, opened the balcony door, and let the breeze fill a room that was finally starting to smell like home. After a while, I texted back, "Thank you for saying that. I never needed an apology. I just needed the truth to be seen. I'm okay now, and I hope you will be too." I don't know if Tiffany wrote that message out of real remorse or as a reaction to everything falling apart, but for the first time, I didn't feel pulled into the whirlpool of doubt, guilt, or blame. I had found enough silence to recognize that forgiveness is no longer a gesture for others. It's the act of returning freedom to yourself. And that very afternoon, I walked into a bank and signed the contract for the first home I would ever own in my name. A small house, white walls, red-tiled roof, and a bougainvillea trellis just starting to bloom. I didn't reach out, but I didn't block Tiffany either. We kept a respectful distance, like 2 planets that once orbited the same sun, now following separate paths, but never colliding. One quiet April afternoon, after an unusual heat spell had finally eased, I received a birthday card from Tiffany. It wasn't long, no embellishments, just 3 handwritten lines in purple ink. "Happy birthday. I know it's too soon to ask for forgiveness, but if one day you want to talk, I'll be here." No gift, no repeat apologies, just a gentle presence, no pressure. I placed the card on the table. 3 days later, I replied, "This Saturday, I'm thinking of getting BBQ at our old spot, the place we used to go in high school. If you're free, feel free to swing by." I didn't expect anything from that meal. I just wanted to see if anything from the old memories could still hold, if both of us were willing to step into the present. Tiffany showed up, on time. She wore a simple dress, minimal makeup, and brought no stories about our parents. We talked about how the BBQ was still as good as ever, about how the place had changed owners, but kept the same charcoal grilling, about her new job, She was working at a nonprofit that helped students recover from emotional abuse at home. I was surprised. And then, I smiled. After we paid the bill, I stood up first and said, I don't think we can go back to what we were, but if we start again, with honesty and respect, maybe we can build something new, with clearer boundaries. Tiffany nodded, eyes a little red. That's all I could hope for. I left that night without regret, without inflated hopes, just a quiet knowing that I had done the right thing for myself. And maybe the real miracle doesn't come from total reconciliation, but from learning how to keep your boundaries, even when your heart is still soft. The Silent Daughters Foundation has been running for 4 months. I'm sitting in a small co-working office in a quiet 3-story building in the south of the city, and the first emails are starting to come in, from young women in all corners of the country. One just left home after being forced to give up her college scholarship. Another had her finances cut off for speaking out against a cousin, and one had lived in a dorm for 2 years without a single call from her family. I can't save everyone, but I can start with 1, then 2, then over 200. Each supported application is a story entrusted to us, a sliver of a life once thought invisible. And somehow every thank you letter I receive becomes a piece of my own healing. My little apartment has cream-colored walls, wide windows that catch the morning sun, and a bookshelf I'm slowly filling with the books I once dreamed of buying, but always waited for on sale. I've adopted another cat, a calico I found in the rain. I named her Lucky. I don't talk to my parents anymore. They haven't changed, and I no longer need them to. I don't feel anger. I don't wish for them to understand someday. I've simply let go. Someone once asked me, does money change people? I thought for a moment, then replied, no. Money magnifies what's already there. What really changes people is when they choose to look at themselves honestly. I never wanted revenge. I just wanted to live a life that didn't bend, didn't tiptoe, didn't have to shrink to make others feel comfortable with my existence. Now, every time I step outside, I no longer wonder how I'm being perceived. I no longer need to be loved the old way. I just need to be myself. Money can buy freedom, but only letting go can buy peace. Have you ever had to stand up to your own family? If tomorrow you won the lottery and your family asked for half, what would you do? Share your story in the comments below. If you'd like more videos on family struggles, hit the like button and subscribe for more content on relationships and personal growth. And remember, this community needs your voice, even if it costs nothing. Thank you for watching, and always remember, your story matters here.